Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. As a Michigan fan myself, I cannot remember a time where I was more excited for a spring practice window than what we're going to see over the next couple of weeks and months within this Michigan program. And obviously, it starts at the quarterback position with Bryce Underwood coming in. There are position battles up and down this Michigan roster heading into spring practice. There's a lot of healthy competition. Want to take a look at just an early preview of some of these position battles that we're going to see play out. And I'm going to kind of call my shot, if you will, in terms of who I think wins some of these position battles and who kind of, emerges as difference makers for this Michigan program going into 2025. Now, before we get into it, as always, look to the Michigan fans middle of February. Call your shot in the comment section. And what players are you most excited for going into spring practice? Who do you really think kind of emerges as some of these difference makers for Michigan going into 2025? Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. To the Michigan fans, the amount of support y'all have shown the fellas has been amazing. And again, as a Michigan fan, I haven't had more fun talking about this Michigan program in a really long time. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, we're not going to talk about the quarterback position because we spent 20 minutes talking about it the other day. And I kind of want to highlight some of these other really intriguing position battles that we are going to see play out. Starting with the running back spot where you got two really good running backs in Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall. And look, I don't know if I view this that much as a position battle because I think you're going to see a lot of Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall in the 2025 year. That might be one of the better running back duos that you see in the country. And I think what really excites Michigan fans is what happens if you hear one of these running backs really emerge as that running back one. Because what does that mean? Justice Haynes separates from Jordan Marshall or vice versa. Jordan Marshall separates from a guy like Justice Haynes. You got a difference maker at the running back spot. But I would predict that Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall, we're going to see a lot of both of them in the 2025 year. Now, at that running back spot, it don't really matter who's the quote-unquote running back one. Kind of matters about what the workload looks like. And I would guess right now it's going to be pretty dang even. Wide receiver position, probably the biggest storyline for Michigan outside of the quarterback spot. Are we good enough around in the pass catchers going into 2025? It's a question that I have for Michigan. I'm sure it's a question many Michigan fans have as well. Kind of previewing this position, I want to start with Donovan McCulley. I feel pretty confident that he's going to be starting for Michigan in 2025. And I think what excites me about this kid the most is we just haven't had a wide receiver that looks like Donovan McCulley and has the skill set that Donovan McCulley has in a really long time. This is 6'5", 200-plus pound wide receiver that works vertically exceptionally well. We just didn't have this kind of wide receiver in the 2024 year. And I get the quarterback play certainly lacked. There ain't no question about that. But I think the wide receiver position certainly did as well. And a guy like Donovan McCulley can add that deeper third dimension to this Michigan offense that we probably just did not have in the 2025 or 2024 year. Freddie Moore is probably the other guy that I feel really confident plays a lot for Michigan in 2025. We saw this kid kind of that light bulb was flickering at the end of 2024. And I think it would have turned on had we had better quarterback play. And now with the quarterback play that we might have going into 2025, Fred Moore, I think, can be a difference maker for Michigan. You see a really intriguing position battle between Anthony Simpson and Samaj Morgan, two slot wide receivers that are really good with the football in their hands. I give a slight lean to Anthony Simpson. Going back and watching some of his stuff from UMass back in 2023, that he's built almost like a running back, and he's exceptionally hard to tackle for defensive backs. And one of the things that excites me the most about this Chip Lindsey offense is we're going to see more space get created. Now, I think one of the biggest problems we saw with this Michigan offense last year is, how many times were we getting the football to our playmakers in space with the opportunity to work after the catch? Not very often. I think Chip Lindsey and the way he wants to run this offense, hey, we're going to spread defenses out and we're going to try to get the football into our playmakers' hands in space and let them have some success. I think Anthony Simpson can really excel with this Chip Lindsey offense. A couple of those dark horses you have to talk about. Andrew Marsh coming in as a true freshman. I like Andrew Marsh going back to when he committed to Michigan because he's a polished up wide receiver. I mean, a lot of wide receivers that you see come out of high school are, for lack of better terms, like one trick ponies. They're really, really fast. They're really, really big, but don't do a ton of things really well and kind of need to develop as all around wide receivers before they can play. Andrew Marsh coming out, he was not the biggest wide receiver. He's not the fastest wide receiver, but what made him a top 100 national recruit is he was very, very polished with his route tree, knows how to create separation. That matters if you want to play early. And so keep an eye on Andrew Marsh and keep an eye on Kenny Bell. I mean, Kendrick Bell is another guy that has flashed at times, might be able to put it together going into 2025. Are we good enough at the pass catcher position? That's going to be a huge storyline for Michigan in spring practice. Tight end position. This is intriguing because I think this is a bigger position battle than we give it credit for. I don't know how much 12 personnel, you go back 12 months ago, I don't know if this was that big of a position battle because Michigan runs a lot of 12 personnel, meaning we have two tight ends on the football field pretty consistently. With Chip Lindsey taking over this offense, I don't know how much 12 personnel we're going to see. I don't know how many times. I think a lot of the times we're only going to have one tight end on the football field. Marlon Klein, Hogan Hansen, potentially a guy like Brady Prescore and Max Bredesen, obviously kind of that blocking H-back tight end. Marlon Klein, Hogan Hansen. That's what I'm looking at. You saw good things from both of them. Who kind of emerges as that one tight end on the football field, certainly worth monitoring. I'm going to give the edge to Marlon Klein because I think this kid is just going in the right direction. I mean, I think we forget him. He's from Germany. He's kind of new to the sport of football when he moved over to the United States at the high school ranks. He's a freaky athlete. That's what you keep hearing from this Michigan coaching staff. Another year of development for Marlon Klein. He's one of those guys that I really think could break out for Michigan in 2025. And it's going to be a big position, especially with Bryce Underwood at quarterback potentially. You want your freshman quarterback to have that safety blanket tight end, the guy that Colson Loveland was for Michigan the last couple of years. Can Marlon Klein be that for Michigan? It's a big storyline. On the offensive line, I feel pretty good about this being our starting lineup. And I think the intriguing storylines here is one, I am sky high on Andrew Sprague. I mean, what he looked like as a true freshman against Alabama, a guy that was not involved with this Michigan program in spring practice this time last year. He was a late enrollee in the summer. He was 285 pounds when he came in. Puts on the weight, plays as a true freshman against Alabama at right tackle, looked really, really good. I think you might be looking at an all-conference guy with Andrew. Evan Link at the left tackle spot. There's a chance Andrew Sprague might move to left and you move Evan Link back to right, but I'll have Evan Link at left tackle right now. I think the storylines here is what does Andrew Babaloa look like as an early enrollee freshman? I think he probably needs a year before he's ready to play, but he's a guy that really could put together a really fun storyline for us Michigan fans during spring practice. Brady Norton's another guy. I lean Nathan Afobe starting at guard. I loved what you saw from Afobe back in the spring game this time a year ago. I think he'll be ready to start. Throw Jake Winera in there too. Another guy that was impressive in the spring game. Like where Michigan sits from a depth standpoint. You got a couple of guys that you feel good about could kind of emerge, but I feel like what your starting five is going to look like, which I think is important going into spring practice. I mean, this time last year, we had no clue what our offensive line was going to look like. I think you have a better conception of what it's going to be, and I think that's good to get these guys a lot of reps together during spring practice and fall camp. You talk about Michigan's early struggles on the offensive line last year. I think that had a lot to do with there were a lot of new faces, and there was probably a lot of mix and matching going on in spring practice and fall camp. Having a better feel of what our starting five looks like and letting these guys work together for multiple weeks and months leading up to 2025, I think that's going to help this Michigan offensive line kind of hit the ground running in 2025 versus the growing pains that we saw in the 2024 year. Going over to the defensive side of the football, this is probably where the more intriguing position battles lie. TJ Guy and Derek Moore, you're starting guys coming off the edge. They're two guys. Getting them back was massive. They're two NFL guys. On the inside of the defensive line, the storyline is, all right, who kind of emerges as your starters that are playing the bulk of the snaps? Is it the transfer portal additions in Damon Payne and Trey Williams? Or is it the guys that we had on this roster last year, Trey Pierce, Rayshawn Benny, maybe even Eno Etta? I kind of lean some of the guys we had. I mean, I know Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant got a lot of the national media attention. Thought Trey Pierce was playing some really good football towards the end of 2024. Rayshawn Benny's been a stalwart for Michigan for the last couple of years. Then Etta. The light bulb might be turning on going into year 3. This was a guy that came in, thought he was going to be an edge rusher, puts on some weight, moves on to the inside. Year 3 might be the year he breaks out. But I love that Michigan went to the portal and grabbed 2 known commodities that we know can play at a power 4 level in Devon Payne and Trey Williams. Doesn't really matter who starts, but you kind of like the depth that Michigan has built up on the inside of the defensive line. Go into the linebacker room. You know who your starters are right now in Ernest Hausman and Jayshon Barham. I think the question mark is, say, Jayshon Barham, when there's been some smoke around this, maybe moves to kind of rush the passer. Oh, we're going to – that's still out the depth chart. Say Jayshon Barham, a guy that maybe moves to the edge rusher spot, and like there's being kind of talk about. Then you got Cole Sullivan, Jimmy Rolder, who are probably competing for that other linebacker spot. But as it sits right now, you feel really good about Ernest Hausman, Jayshon Barham coming back. Cole Sullivan and Jimmy Rolder are certainly guys that we're looking for in spring practice. The secondary is where there's a long conversation. I think we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the secondary during spring practice. What do we do with Zeke Berry is probably the number one question. And I think what we do with Zeke Berry is probably dependent on what Josiah Edmond and Shamari Earls look like in spring practice. You got one starter in Jair Hill, right? We've seen him play. He's going into year 3. He's going to be the cornerback 1, at least in my opinion. Josiah Edmond and Shamari Earls, can one or both show that they can play a lot of football for us in 2025? Because if that's the case, I think you can move Zeke Berry back to nickel. And I think Zeke Berry at nickel is probably where you want him. He was very solid as a boundary cornerback, kind of had to play there with the injuries that Will Johnson kind of had late in the season. But what's his best position is probably nickel. That's where he started the season out in 2024. If Josiah Edmond and Shamari Earls kind of step up on the boundary, it allows you to put Zeke Berry back in the position that I think he's best at, which is playing nickel. That's probably the ideal situation. Then you look in the back end, Rod Moore. I know we've talked about it. It's huge to get him back because there are some moving pieces in the secondary. Rod Moore is like having a coach on the football field. One, he's a really good football player, all conference, a potential All-American candidate at safety. But he's also a guy that he's going to be the glue that kind of brings this unit together that's going to be young and it's going to have some new faces. I'm going to lean TJ Metcalf. I think TJ Metcalf was a really underrated pickup for Michigan in the portal. That's a guy that started every single game for Arkansas last year. And it's not a shot at Brandon Hillman. Brandon Hillman's going to play a lot of football for Michigan, but TJ Metcalf is about as solid as they come. And if Brandon Hillman or Mason Curtis or potentially a true freshman like Keona Winston, if they beat out TJ Metcalf, they're going to be solid safeties. But right now, I'm going to give TJ Metcalf the nod there. I think he's really, really solid. And then Rod Moore. The secondary, you got some position flex. You got some young talent that's getting injected into this unit. I'm excited to see how that shakes out. And to me, for Wink, it's all about, hey, how can we get our best football players on the football field in positions that they can be successful? And to me, I look at it and say that's Zeke Berry at nickel. That's Jair Hill / Josiah Edmond and Shamari Earls with Rod Moore and TJ Metcalf in the back end. It's as it sits right now. A lot to figure out over the next couple of weeks. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. We'll continue to update this list and update the depth chart as we hear what's coming out of spring practice. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.